Flannan Isles Lighthouse, a beacon shrouded in mystery. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse stands as one of the most enigmatic maritime structures in the British Isles. Perched atop Eilean Mòr, the largest of the remote Flannan Isles in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, this solitary beacon has not only guided countless mariners through the North Atlantic's perilous waters, but has also become the epicenter of one of the greatest unsolved maritime mysteries in British history. The lighthouse, completed in 1899, is best known for the inexplicable disappearance of its three keepers in December 1900. Since then, this event has fueled speculation, inspired poetry and literature, and invited numerous paranormal theories. To understand the full significance of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, one must delve into its origins, operations, and the cultural weight it has acquired in the wake of tragedy. The Flannan Isles are a cluster of 7 small islands located approximately 20 miles west of the Isle of Lewis. Eilean Mòr, where the lighthouse resides, is the largest of the group. The islands are rugged, windswept, and devoid of permanent human habitation. Historically, they were visited only by shepherds, monks, and later lighthouse keepers. Their isolation made them a navigational hazard, but also an ideal location for a lighthouse. The treacherous waters around the Flannan Isles are known for sudden storms, high waves, and rocky coastlines, all of which made maritime travel dangerous long before modern navigation systems. The name Flannan is derived from Saint Flannan, a 7th century Irish preacher. A small chapel ruin dedicated to him still exists on Eilean Mòr, suggesting that the islands held spiritual significance long before the lighthouse was conceived. Plans for the lighthouse were initiated in the late 19th century due to the increasing maritime traffic around the Western Isles and the high incidence of shipwrecks in the area. The Northern Lighthouse Board, responsible for Scottish lighthouses, commissioned the renowned engineer David Allen Stevenson, a member of the famous Stevenson family of lighthouse builders. Construction began in 1895 and took 4 years to complete. Due to the island's remoteness and lack of natural harbour, materials had to be hauled up steep inclines via a specially constructed railway and winch system. The 75-foot tall lighthouse tower, built with brick and clad in white-painted masonry, was equipped with a paraffin-powered light that had a range of 24 nautical miles. Despite the challenging logistics, the lighthouse was completed in December 1899 and lit for the first time on December 7th of that year. 3 keepers were stationed on the island at any given time, with a 4th rotating on shore leave. Their lives were governed by strict routines, maintaining the light, cleaning machinery, logging weather data, and maintaining communication via flag signals with passing ships or the mainland. Living conditions were austere but sufficient. Provisions were delivered periodically by supply boat, and keepers often relied on each other for social interaction and support. Despite the isolation, the keepers were known to be professional and well-trained. No reports prior to the 1900 incident suggested mental instability or misconduct. The Flannan Isles, however, did demand emotional and physical resilience. The harsh environment and solitude often tested the psychological limits of those stationed there. The most defining and chilling moment in the history of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse occurred in December 1900, just 1 year after the lighthouse became operational. The event, commonly referred to as the Flannan Isles disappearance, has captivated historians, maritime experts, and paranormal enthusiasts for over a century. On the surface, it appears to be a tragic accident, but the details surrounding the vanishing of 3 experienced lighthouse keepers remain eerily unsettling, giving rise to an enduring mystery. By December 1900, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse was still relatively new, staffed by 3 full-time keepers, principal keeper James Ducat, second assistant Thomas Marshall, and occasional keeper Donald MacArthur. The station functioned as per the Northern Lighthouse Board's established rotation system. A 4th keeper, Joseph Mòr, was on leave at the time and was scheduled to rotate back in with the arrival of the next supply vessel. The keepers' routine was rigorous but well-defined. Every day they would maintain the light mechanism, perform weather recordings, log their activities, and maintain the facility. While the job was monotonous and the environment bleak, the men were reportedly stable and experienced. Duckett was a respected veteran of the lighthouse service. Marshall had served in multiple remote posts, and MacArthur, though a last-minute substitute for an ill colleague, was known to be capable and reliable. The lighthouse was due for a routine resupply visit on December 20th, 1900, by the steamer Hesperus, captained by Jim Harvey. However, fierce winter storms in the Atlantic delayed the ship's departure from the Isle of Lewis. It wasn't until December 26th that the Hesperus finally made its way to Eilean Mòr. As the ship approached the island, crew members immediately noticed something odd. The flagstaff was bare, showing no signal flag, which was standard protocol for expecting visitors. Additionally, no keepers appeared at the landing site to assist with docking or receiving supplies. This was highly unusual and immediately caused concern aboard the vessel. Captain Harvey ordered the boat's whistle to be sounded and a flare to be launched, standard signals to alert the keepers. But there was no response from the island. Concerned, Harvey sent Joseph Mòr, the returning keeper, ashore to investigate. Mòr climbed the steep stairs up to the lighthouse, growing increasingly uneasy as he neared the building. When he reached the entrance, he discovered that the main door was closed but unlocked. Inside, he found the entrance hall eerily silent, and upon entering the living quarters, he was met with a deeply disturbing scene. The beds were unmade, the kitchen table was set for a meal that had not been eaten, and the clock on the wall had stopped. A chair near the table was overturned, suggesting a sudden, perhaps violent, interruption. One of the oilskin coats used for protection in harsh weather was still hanging on its hook, implying that at least one keeper had left the safety of the lighthouse without full gear in dangerous conditions. Mòr returned to the ship with the grim news. Harvey immediately ordered further searches of the island. A landing party combed the surrounding cliffs, the railway tracks, the winch house, and the lighthouse grounds, but there was no trace of Duckett, Marshall, or MacArthur. The logbooks were found and secured, and no entries beyond December 15th were initially identified, suggesting something had occurred between then and the Hesperus' delayed arrival. Captain Harvey sent urgent messages via telegram to the Northern Lighthouse Board and local authorities. Meanwhile, he left Mòr and 3 volunteers on the island to continue manning the lighthouse and keep it operational. The remaining crew returned to the mainland with the disturbing news. The official inquiry, launched immediately, focused on the last known activity of the keepers and any clues within the lighthouse that could explain their absence. Despite extensive searching and interviewing, the inquiry was unable to produce a definitive explanation. However, a leading theory emerged, that the men had been swept away by a rogue wave while attempting to secure equipment or cargo on the landing platform during a storm. But this theory, while plausible, raised additional questions. According to protocol, only 2 keepers were to leave the lighthouse at once, leaving 1 man inside at all times. Why had all 3 gone out together? Furthermore, why would any of them leave the safety of the lighthouse during high seas, especially without full protective gear? A particularly intriguing element in the story is the alleged contents of the final entries in the logbook. While official records do not confirm their authenticity, various retellings suggest the entries included unsettling remarks. One such entry allegedly noted, "Severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen. Duckett quiet, Marshall crying." Another claimed, "Storm still raging, sea is very rough, prayers being said." The final chilling entry was said to read, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." These entries, if genuine, suggest psychological distress among the keepers and a mysterious calm before their vanishing. However, many historians believe these passages were fabricated later to sensationalize the mystery. Official documents make no reference to emotional breakdowns or extraordinary log entries. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of the disappearance is the complete lack of physical evidence. No bodies were ever found, nor were any personal items or clothing washed ashore. In normal conditions, the North Atlantic frequently returns debris or remains to nearby coastlines after accidents at sea. That nothing was ever recovered fed speculation that something more sinister or supernatural had occurred. Additionally, the physical environment offered some contradictions to the official narrative. The western landing platform was heavily damaged, indicating powerful waves had battered it in recent days. Iron railings were bent, and parts of the rail track had been dislodged. This seemed to support the rogue wave theory. Yet, skeptics pointed out that the interior of the lighthouse remained orderly, save for the overturned chair, and that 2 oilskins were missing, suggesting a deliberate and perhaps non-panic departure by at least 2 of the men. The families of the keepers were devastated by the incident. With no bodies to bury, their grief remained suspended in uncertainty. Some suspected foul play or cover-ups. Others believed in supernatural involvement. The public, meanwhile, was captivated. Newspapers across Britain covered the story with feverish speculation. The disappearance quickly became a cultural phenomenon. One widely circulated letter to the editor in a Scottish paper speculated whether the men had been taken by a giant sea creature, while another referenced ancient Celtic spirits said to haunt the remote islands. The chapel ruins on Eilean Mòr only added to the eerie backdrop. In the wake of the disappearance, the Northern Lighthouse Board reviewed safety protocols and mental health evaluations for isolated postings. Although the automation of lighthouses would not begin for decades, the incident at Flannan Isles became a benchmark case for the dangers of remote stations, both physically and psychologically. Future postings to Flannan were made with extra caution, and additional safety rules were imposed, including stricter adherence to the one man inside at all times rule. However, many keepers who served there in subsequent decades reported a lingering unease, often describing the lighthouse as oppressively quiet or spiritually heavy. In summary, the 1900 disappearance of the 3 keepers at the Flannan Isles Lighthouse is one of the most enduring and perplexing maritime mysteries in history. Despite official explanations, the absence of physical evidence, conflicting details, and the island's isolation have allowed the mystery to remain tantalizingly unresolved. Whether viewed as a tragic accident, a psychological collapse, or something more otherworldly, the event transformed a humble lighthouse into a monument of maritime myth. The Northern Lighthouse Board conducted a full investigation. Their final report posited that high winds and heavy seas had likely caused the disappearance. They theorized that Marshall and Ducat had gone out to secure equipment. MacArthur followed against orders, and all 3 were swept away by a freak wave. Over the years, small details added to the mystery. The logbook reportedly contained strange entries about severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen, and mentions of prayers and fear. Entries some claim were later proven to be fabrications. Regardless, no bodies were ever recovered, and the mystery persists to this day. While the mysterious 1900 disappearance of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse keepers remains the most notorious event tied to Eilean Mòr, the surrounding waters have a much longer and darker legacy. Long before the lighthouse was constructed, the Flannan Isles and the waters of the surrounding North Atlantic were infamous for shipwrecks, tragic losses, and perilous navigation. Even after the lighthouse was built, its light wasn't always enough to prevent misfortune. In the centuries before the Flannan Isles Lighthouse was established, the seas off Scotland's western coast were notorious for their danger to sailors. The Flannan Isles, part of the Outer Hebrides, lie along one of the main shipping routes between the Atlantic and the northern UK ports. Before the modern era, this corridor was trafficked by fishing vessels, merchant ships, whaling expeditions, and naval patrols, all vulnerable to the region's mercurial weather. The islands themselves are barely visible until a ship is dangerously close, especially in stormy weather or fog. Composed of sharp cliffs, hidden reefs, and submerged rocks, they offered little refuge to damaged or off-course vessels. They did, however, function as an unintentional trap. Small islands like the Flannans can create a dangerous sense of false security to navigators in distress, especially in times of low visibility. Before the lighthouse was constructed, there are records of at least a dozen documented shipwrecks in the immediate vicinity of the Flannan Isles between the 1600s and the mid-1800s, although the true number may be far higher due to the remoteness of the area and incomplete maritime record-keeping. One of the earliest and best documented tragedies involved the Mary Jane, a cargo ship carrying wool and cotton from Ireland to Norway. Caught in a storm off the west coast of Lewis in October 1792, she drifted westward. The captain's log, recovered from a message in a bottle, if legend is to be believed, described unforgiving winds and phantom rocks near a group of islets believed to be the Flannans. Fragments of timber and cargo later washed ashore on Lewis and Harris, and a single body was recovered near Loch Rogue. It is presumed that the Mary Jane met its end upon the cliffs of Eilean Mòr, or one of its neighbouring rocks. Oral tradition among Hebridean fishermen suggests that eerie lights were seen on the island the night the Mary Jane was lost, years before the lighthouse existed. Just 5 years after the disappearance of the lighthouse keepers, another tragedy occurred within sight of the Flannan Isles. The Firth of Clyde, a steamer en route from Glasgow to New York, reported heavy fog and malfunctioning navigational equipment in December 1905. The vessel avoided direct collision with Eilean Mòr, but struck an uncharted submerged rock believed to be part of a low-lying reef adjacent to the Isles. The damage was severe, and though the crew attempted to steer the vessel eastward, it took on water rapidly. The lifeboats were deployed, and most of the passengers survived, but 5 crew members drowned during the evacuation. Survivors reported hearing a low, hollow bell coming from the island, though the lighthouse had no such bell installed. A lighthouse tender later confirmed the light had been operational during the incident, but its beam may have been partially obscured by sea mist or distorted by refraction. In October 1947, a Royal Navy reconnaissance flight reported seeing what appeared to be a derelict vessel drifting near the Flannan Isles. A destroyer was dispatched, but by the time it arrived, no trace of the ship could be found. Only scattered wooden debris and a strange patch of discoloration on the sea surface. No distress signals were reported, and no ships were listed as overdue in the area. The event became part of local legend, with islanders referring to it as the Iona ghost ship, perhaps a phantom echo of an earlier wreck, or a vessel lost and forgotten before it could be logged in naval records. Some believe the mysterious ship was a trawler lost in a storm and never officially recorded, but others tie it to the lingering mystery and perceived hauntedness of the area. Celtic maritime culture is steeped in superstition, and the Flannan Isles have long featured in those beliefs as a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Sailors from Lewis and Harris passed down stories of sea spirits, selkies, and second sight visions experienced near the islands. One common superstition warned fishermen not to approach the Isles on the 21st of December, the date of the 1900 disappearance. Some refused to even say the name Flannan while at sea, fearing it would invite misfortune. Stories circulated of phantom ships seen from the lighthouse tower, or disembodied voices drifting over the water on calm nights. These beliefs were not merely remnants of an ancient oral tradition. Many persisted well into the 20th century. Even today, some fishermen in the Outer Hebrides avoid casting nets too near the islands, citing generational warnings passed down from their grandfathers and great-grandfathers. The history of shipwrecks and marine loss around the Flannan Isles paints a broader picture. This remote outpost was always more than just a navigational challenge. It became a symbol of maritime peril, a liminal zone between survival and loss. The sheer number of incidents near the Isles, combined with their remoteness and the cultural fabric of maritime Scotland, fed into the mystique and dread that have long surrounded the lighthouse. The tragedy of the vanished keepers was not a singular event, but rather the most dramatic and continuing of hardship, loss, and unexplained phenomena. As such, the Flannan Isles serve not only as a cautionary tale for mariners, but also as a fertile ground for legends that intertwine fact and folklore, tragedy and myth. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse stands as a potent symbol of nature's indifference, human fragility, and the enduring power of mystery. Its isolated location, stark beauty, and the disappearance of its keepers combine to make it a unique locus of intrigue. While rational explanations abound, the absence of definitive evidence keeps the door open for paranormal interpretations. Whether viewed as a tragic accident, a psychological breakdown, or a supernatural event, the incident challenges our understanding of reality and feeds our fascination with the unknown. Ultimately, the story of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse reminds us that some mysteries, perhaps the most haunting ones, resist tidy resolutions.